Hi guys. Today we are going to talk about paper 2, which is multiple choice question, and the year that we're going to look at is 2022, and it's October November 1. So this is the newest paper, of course. It's for 21 version, the version 2001 actually, for 0616. It's not going to be too hard, but let me just go through everything. So let's get started with number 1. So, which process provides an organism with the raw materials needed for tissue repair? So it says providing the organism with raw materials and needed for tissue repair. So in order to repair the tissues, we need energy. But where do the energies come from? They come from food. So the organisms have to take food molecules to convert the food molecules into chemical energy called ATPs. So the ATPs are used to repair the tissues. Hence, the answer should be C for this one, nutrition. So nutrition means the organism is taking the food molecules in, okay? So eating, like consuming, ingesting, absorbing, and so on. Hence, the answer should be C for this one. All right. Number 2. Which name is given to a group of individuals that can reproduce to produce fertile offspring? So, a group of individuals, it says individuals. So, we are only looking at the single organisms here, and it says they can reproduce to produce a fertile offspring. So by looking at it, the answer should be C, because species are, the definition of the species is a group of individuals that can interbreed, so they can mate together to produce fertile offspring. Okay, so for example, lions can interbreed, or they can actually mate with tigers, but it doesn't actually happen that often. It usually happens artificially, so by people. People are involved in this. So when this happens, if they give birth to the ligers or tions. So ligers are infertile. So which means they can't give birth to the babies, the offsprings. That's why the lions and tigers are not same species. However, if lions are mated with other, not ligers, lions, then they'll give birth to the lioness, lion cubs. Okay, sorry about that. It's early in the morning, so and these lions are actually fertile, meaning that they can give birth to the babies if they mate with another, lions. So therefore, lions and the lions are the same species. So species are a group of individuals that can produce fertile. This is important, okay? Very important. Fertile offspring, okay? So the answer should be C. Number 3. Root hair cells are found on plant roots. Which feature is present in a root hair cell but not in a sperm cell? Root hair cells are plant cells. Sperm cells are animal cells. Okay? So it's like plant cells versus animal cells. And you know that plant cells have chloroplasts, cell walls, and large vacuole, which animal cells don't have. Okay, so we can see that the cell wall and chloroplasts are here. So the answer should be B or C. But here's the trick. Some of you guys might think, hey, both of them can be the answers. Is this question mistaken? Nope, it has a trick. So the answer is B only because the root hair cells don't actually have any chloroplasts. The reason is that the root hair cells are in roots. Okay, they're in the roots. So do they need any chloroplast? No, because they can't receive the sunlight. So there's no sunlight going into the soil, so they don't need chloroplasts. So the only answer here is B. I think this question was quite good. It's got a little bit of a trick there, so yeah, I love these kind of questions. So, all good? Hey, thanks guys. Number 4. The diagram shows a cross-section of part of a leaf. Which type of cell carries out the most photosynthesis? So, which part of cell carries out the most photosynthesis? As you can see from the diagram, that cells in this part has a lot of chloroplasts. So all these black dots are chloroplasts. And of course the white ones, the biggest circle here, that's nucleus. And the space in here is of course the large vacuole. So we already know that the chloroplasts are responsible for the photosynthesis. So hence this cell or these cells are the ones that carry out the most photosynthesis. B does not have any chloroplast, so it doesn't. It's actually upper epidermis. This is upper epidermis, which is transparent, so the light can just go through it. Transparent. And A is the palisade mesophyll layer cells, or palisade mesophyll cells. They receive the sunlight the most, so they should have most number of chloroplasts, and they do the photosynthesis the most. And C, so this cell is called spongy cell, or spongy mesophyll cell. And it does receive sunlight, that's why it has few chloroplasts. And D is lower epidermis. Okay, so it's a lower epidermis, so it receives like almost no sunlight, but and it's not really responsible for photosynthesis, and it's transparent as well, like upper epidermis. And there are some guard cells, and these guys are responsible for making this whole pathway called stomata. So the function of sponge cell is to provide enough air gaps so that the water or the water molecules can evaporate later, and they can become water vapors, and then water vapors can accumulate inside the leaf, and then they can leave by diffusion. They can leave the leaves by diffusion. And that process is transpiration. And we can talk about this on later, okay? When we need to talk about this. And other videos, actually, my other videos actually talk about transpiration because there are many questions about it. So check those videos out as well if you can, or if you want to know more about the transpiration. Yep. Okay. So the answer for this question is A. Number 5. Some examples of substances moving across membranes are listed. For which examples must oxygen be present? So this question is quite tricky as well, but I like this question. So the reason why we need oxygen is for the respiration. Respiration is a process that makes energy, so it releases energy. And hence, what this question is asking is that which of these 3 requires energy? Number 1, glucose molecules into epithelium that lines the small intestine. Our body loves glucose molecules. Okay, so the small intestine inside us, whenever they have glucose molecules in them, even if our body already has a lot of glucose molecules, they just take them in. So even if our body has a lot of glucose molecules, which means we have high concentration of glucose inside our body and relatively low concentration in the small intestine, we just absorb them into our body. So the glucose molecules are now traveling from or transporting from low concentration to high concentration. And this process is, of course, called active transport. So movement of particles from low concentration to high concentration requires energy. Okay? Because this is an unusual thing. It's not like something moving from high place to low place, which is natural thing. So it doesn't require energy, but this is unusual thing. So it does need energy. So if the particle wants to move from low concentration to high concentration, it can go by diffusion, so it needs to take active transport, and it does require energy. So 1, yes, it does need energy, so therefore it does need oxygen. Okay, so oxygen is needed to respire, thereby producing energy, and this needs energy. So yes, it needs respiration and it needs oxygen. Okay, so 1 is correct, yes. Number 2, nitrate ions from dilute solution in soil into more concentrated solution. So here we go. It just says the nitrate ions are in dilute solution, which means it has low concentration in the solution. It's moving to a more concentrated solution, so that's active transport there. So the active transport requires energy, so yes, oxygen is needed for this one as well. So 1 and 2, okay, these are quite promising. Let's have a look at number 3. Water molecules from mesophyll cells into the air spaces of a leaf. So this says the movement of water molecules. Okay, the movement of water molecules is called osmosis. Osmosis is the movement of water molecules from high water potential to low water potential. And this is important through a partially permeable membrane or semi permeable membrane. Okay, so this semi or partially permeable membrane means that this membrane lets some particles or some molecules in and out, but doesn't on some other molecules or particles. So it just selectively permeates. Is there a word called permeates? I'm not sure about that. Or let's say allow. Okay, it selectively allows some particles or molecules to go in and out of the cell. Okay. So, so osmosis is moving the water molecules moving from high to low water potential. So it does not need energy. It's called passive transport. So passive transport does not need energy. So it's the exact opposite concept of active transport. Active transport, as we already know, requires energy. Okay? So 3 is not the answer. So hence, the answer should be B for this one. It's quite messy here. So yeah, the answer should be B. Number 6. The graph shows how the target pressure inside a plant cell varies when the cell is placed in external solutions of different concentrations. So, what is the state of the cell at point X? It looks like target pressure inside a cell is decreasing as the concentration of external solution increases. So this is happening because the plant cell is placed in a solution. And the solution has some particles, some molecules. I don't know what. It can be sugar or can be salt. We don't know what it is. But however, it doesn't actually matter. Let's say it's salt. Okay. As the concentration of salt gets increased outside, the water potential inside the solution gets decreased. Decrease in water potential. So relatively, the plant cell now has more water molecules than outside. So the water inside the plant cell will move out to the solution by osmosis, because water will always move from high water potential to low water potential, and it's going through the cell membrane here, so we can call it osmosis. So the plant now will lose a lot of water, and initially maybe the plant cell looked like this because it had quite a bit of water. But as it loses the water, it changes a bit. So the cell wall stays the same. However, the membrane gets, let's say, it gets a bit shrunk. And when the plant becomes like this, we call it flaccid. However, when plant cell absorbs water, or the water goes inside the plant cell, it becomes a bit swollen, and that state, or the status, is called turgid. So this turgor pressure is made when the plant cell becomes turgid, and it pushes other cells next to them. Okay. They may push back, and they push the cells that are next to each other on their cell walls. So the cell walls become expanded a bit, and then it creates this pressure called turgor pressure. So turgor pressure is it gets decreased if the cell becomes flaccid. Okay, so there's no pushing force that's caused by increasing water molecules inside. Okay, in flaccid status. Hence, what is the state of the cell at point X? It has lost water and it's flaccid. It has lost water. It is flaccid. Okay. Number 7. The diagram shows a length of DNA. What is the sequence, a basis, in the unlabeled strand of DNA, starting from the top of the diagram? So, starting from the top to the bottom. So, if we just read it, A, T, G, C, A, C, we know that the A will always bind with T, G will always bind C. So it's called complementary base pairing. So this is T, A, C, G, T, G. We just read it from T to G, and we'll get the answer, which is TAC GTG, B. Easy peasy, right? Thanks, guys. Number 8. Amylase and pepsin are digestive systems. The shapes of their active sites are different. What causes the difference in the shapes of their active sites? Okay, so it says the shapes of their active sites are different. Of course, the enzymes are made of proteins, and proteins are made of amino acids. Which means all these parts are made of many amino acids. Okay? So this shape of active site depends on the types of amino acids. So in our body, there are about 20 different types of amino acids. And depending on the different types of amino acids, the active site varies. Okay? Hence the answer is C. Number 9. The rate of an enzyme-controlled reaction decreases when the temperature falls below the optimum. Some possible reasons why it slows down are listed. Which reasons cause the reaction to slow down? So, usually, I like this question because usually the questions ask what happens to the enzyme-controlled reaction when the temperature gets increased. But this question is actually asking what happens if the temperature falls below. So I like it. As the temperature gets decreased, there is less kinetic energy formed. Or not formed, let's say given out. Because energy cannot be made nor destroyed. So let's say there's less energy. And if there's less kinetic energy, then the movement becomes decreased. So 1 is not the right answer because the enzyme molecules are denatured when the temperature gets increased above optimum temperature. Number 2 is ripe, has less kinetic energy. Number 3 is not ripe because the shape of the substrate molecules does not change, okay? Regardless of the changes in temperature. Of course, it does change. It can change if the substrate is protein and the temperature gets increased, but it doesn't say so here. So nope. And it only asks us about the enzyme control reaction anyway. So yeah, you can just ignore this one. And number 4, there are less frequent collisions between molecules. Yes. So if there's less kinetic energy, then there's less frequent collision between the molecules. So the substrate does not move actively, so there's less chance of substrates going into the active site of the enzyme. So it's going to decrease. It's going to decrease the rate of reaction here. Hence, the answer should be 2 and 4, D. Okay. Number 10. Which description of an enzyme catalyst reaction is correct? So enzymes have an active site, or enzyme has an active site. Enzymes have active sites. My bad. Okay, so here the substrate can bind into the active site, and then reaction occurs to produce products. This happens if the substrates can bind to the active sites, okay? If they can fit in. However, if you look at option A, it says the substrate binds to an enzyme with the same shape. Okay, this means the substrate looks like this. Now this is the substrate. Okay. Can this bind to the active site? No. So there's a good term that describes this. The substrate binds to an enzyme with complementary shape. So complementary means that this is complementary to this, like it can fit in, it fits in perfectly or nicely. So the answer should be D. So this expression is quite important when you talk about enzyme catalyst reaction. Okay, so when you write a long answer question or the written question, I often use complementary shape or complementary word itself when I describe something about the enzyme reaction, because this word alone can sometimes give you 1 mark. So I think this word is quite important. Okay, it's a good word to memorize. So keep in mind of that. Okay. Number 11. 4 test tubes are set up as shown. The test tubes are kept at 20 degrees in water bath in the light for 2 hours. In which test tube does the hydrogen carbonate indicator turn yellow? So hydrogen carbonate indicator, okay. So hydrogen carbonate indicator shows, or it changes its color from red, as you can see it's red, from red to other colors, depending on how much carbon dioxide is present. Okay, so it turns into yellow if there's a lot of carbon dioxide. This is a bit too bright there. Okay, I'll just use custom. Maybe this is better. A bit better. So it happens when there's a lot of CO2. High CO2. I'll just write down high CO2. Yeah. It also changes into purple. If there is less CO2. Okay. So here, if you look at A, it's not going to produce a lot of CO2 because the leaves will suck in CO2 for photosynthesis. Okay, so there's less CO2, so it's going to turn into purple here. But if you look at B, so if you look at this test tube, it's covered by black paper. So the light cannot go through the test tube. Hence, there's going to be no photosynthesis. So the only life process that these leaves will do is respiration. So through respiration or by respiration, it's going to produce more carbon dioxide. Hence, there's an increase in carbon dioxide, and it's going to produce, it's not going to produce, it's going to change the red hydrogen carbonate indicator into yellow because there's high concentration of CO2. Hence, the answer should be B. Okay? Number 12. The substrates listed are found in the leaf of a plant. Which substance is obtained from the soil? Okay. So, which substance is obtained from the soil? This question is just asking which substance gets sucked in by the roots from the soil. Of course, carbon dioxide is in the air, so it cannot be the answer. Chlorophyll is not obtained from the soil, it's actually made within the leaf, so no. Glucose molecules are not obtained from the soil, it gets produced by photosynthesis, hence, it's not the answer. It's the mineral ions that get sucked in, that gets absorbed by active transport or diffusion in the soil. So mineral ions such as potassium, like sodium and nitrates, and chloride ions, and so on. These guys are all absorbed by the root hair cells in the roots. Okay, so answer should be D. Number 13. The cholera bacterium produces toxins that cause chloride ions to be excreted into the small intestine. What is the immediate effect of this on the water potential of blood in the intestinal capillaries and on the water potential of the contents of the small intestine? Okay, in order to explain this, let's talk about what happens to the small intestine when there's a bacterium called Vibrio cholerae. So the bacteria that causes cholera is called Vibrio cholerae. Of course, for IGCSE, you don't have to know the name of this bacterium. However, this bacterium produces toxin, okay? When there's presence of bacterium called Vibrio cholerae, it produces toxins. And these toxins these toxins cause the chloride ions chloride ions to go into the lumen of the small intestine. So lumen means space. So the chloride ions goes into the lumen, which decreases the water potential of the small intestine. So this question was asking the immediate effect of this. So since there are a lot of chloride ions in this lumen, relatively, the water potential in the lumen has decreased. Hence, relatively, the capillaries in the small intestine has higher water potential than inside the lumen. So this is the immediate effect of these toxins. So water potential in blood, in capillaries, becomes raised, and the contents, so the water potential of the contents of small intestine gets lowered. Hence, the answer is C. Number 14. The graph shows the concentration of maltose in different parts of the alimentary canal. What causes the change in concentration at X? So here you can see that maltose concentration gets increased as the food molecule travels from the mouth, stomach, and to small intestine. Then suddenly you can see the maltose concentration gets decreased. This means that maltose molecules are being broken down. So what are the enzymes that break down the maltose or maltose molecules? They're called maltases. Hence the answer should be C. So maltose gets broken down by maltase. Sucrose gets broken down by sucrases or sucrase. And lactose gets broken down by lactase. So it's quite common that the name of the enzymes have ASE. Okay? And when maltose gets broken down, it gets broken down into glucose molecules. When sucrose gets broken down, it becomes glucose and fructose. When lactose gets broken down, it becomes glucose and galactose. Okay? So, anyways, the answer for this question is C. Number 15. The diagram shows a bean seedling soon after it has germinated. Where is most water absorbed? Okay, so this question is quite easy peasy. It's the root, of course, that absorbs the water, but more specifically, it's the root hair cells that absorbs the most water. D is pointing at the tip of the root. So, relatively, the root hair cells have more surface area than the tip of the roots. So, the answer should be C. Okay, this is the point, okay? More surface, oops, area in root hair cells, okay? Number 16. Scientists investigate the movement of substances in a plant. They cut a ring of tissue from the stem, removing the tissue removes some of the transport vessels found around the edge of the stem. A few days later, they noticed swelling above the area where the tissue has been removed. So in the diagram, you can see that tissue got removed, and after some time, you can see a bit of swelling in the upper part, but it's perfectly normal at the lower part. So what causes the swelling? It's actually giving all the hints here. So removing tissue removes some of the transport vessels found around the edge of the stem. So if we cut off the stem and see it, then there are two types of transport vessels called xylems and phloems. Okay, the xylems are responsible for transporting water and minerals that are dissolved in water, whereas phloems are responsible for transporting sucrose molecules and other nutrients such as amino acids. Okay, and looks like it's peeling. The tissue got peeled off at the outer part, so around the edge of the stem. So all the phloem are now gone. So the sucrose molecules and other nutrient molecules are not being transported to the roots. Hence, it stops here. The sucrose molecules and other molecules are being accumulated, thereby causing the swelling. So the answer for 16 is A. Phloem vessels have been removed and sucrose cannot move to the sink. Here, it's important to know the concept of sink and source. Sink is where the nutrients are being received. The sources are the ones that send out the nutrients. So depending on the weather and depending on the season, often the leaves are the sources and the roots are the sinks. During the summer and autumn, of course, it changes its role in spring, because in spring all the stems have lost the leaves, and now the roots has to send out the food molecules to the stems so that they can regrow their leaves. So in spring, the roots are now the sources and the stems are now the sinks. Okay? So that's the concept of sink and source. Anyways, the answer for this question is A. Number 17. The diagram shows the outside of a human heart. Which structure is a coronary artery? This is a quick and easy question. Answer should be D. So when we look at the diagram, the left side is actually the right side of the heart, and the right side is actually the left side of the heart. So this big artery is on the right side, so that means it's going to send out the blood to the lungs. And C is, of course, sending out the blood to the body. So B is pulmonary artery. C is aorta. And A is sending the blood into the heart from the right side, so it's called vena cava or vena cava. So D is the answer because the coronary arteries are the blood vessels that provides oxygen and nutrients to the heart. So D is the answer for this question. Number 18. What happens in the heart when blood flows from the atria to ventricles? So when we look at the heart, we just look at the right side of the heart here. So the blood comes into the heart through a blood vessel called vena cava or vena cava. And then the blood enters the space called atrium. And then the blood goes into the ventricle. And then the blood goes out of the heart. So it's asking what happens in the heart when blood flows from the atria or atrium to the ventricle. So atrium muscle, of course, has to contract. So it pushes the blood into the ventricle, yes. So contract is the answer for this question. So the answer should be either A or B. And there's a valve called atrioventricular valve here. So this is the valve between the atrium and the ventricle, hence the name atrioventricular valve. When the blood goes to the ventricle, the valve has to open. So B looks like the answer here. And what happens to ventricle muscles? It shouldn't contract, otherwise it's going to push the blood. So it has to relax. So in order to receive the blood from the atrium or atria, hence the answer should be B. The difference between the atria and the atrium is that the atria is the plural. Okay, so don't get confused about this one. Okay, thanks guys. Number 19. Campylobacter is a bacterium that can cause food poisoning. Wow, so it looks like it's a bacterium that causes food poisoning, which is a bad thing, which is a disease, right? It's a type of disease. Which word describes Campylobacter? So it's a bacterium, which is microorganism, and it's causing food poisoning, which is disease. So this question is asking, what is the word that describes a microorganism that causes diseases? It's called pathogen. So the word pathogen comes from patho, which means disease, and gen comes from microorganism. So microorganism that causes disease is called pathogen. Hence, the answer should be C. Number 20. What is the approximate percentage of oxygen in expired air? So this is something that you guys should just memorize. You have to know the oxygen and carbon dioxide content, like the percentage of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the air, like both inspired air and expired air. So I'm just gonna summarize everything for you. So in inspired air and in expired air, they contain about 21% of oxygen in inspired air, and in expired air, there's about 16. So we take in about 4 to 5% of the oxygen in the air. For CO2, there's about 0.04% of the CO2 in inspired air, and we give out quite a bit. So in expired air, there's like 4% of CO2. So as you can see, we actually give quite a bit of CO2 out of the body. Okay. So the answer should be C for this one, because it's asking about the expired air. Okay, so this is inspired air, this is expired air, this is the amount of CO2 in expired air and in inspired air. Okay. Cool. Sweet as. Thanks, guys. Number 21. Which row shows processes that all use energy from respiration? Diffusion does not require energy, so answer should be either A or D. Cell division, yes, it does require oxygen. Osmosis, no. So osmosis do not require energy because it's a form of passive transport. So the answer should be D already. However, let's look at the other options. So muscle contraction, yes, it does require energy. Passage of nerve impulses. Okay, so nerve sends out the signal called impulse. And it does require energy. The impulses are actually transmitted by cells called neurons. So neurons are nerve cells. And these guys sends out the signals called impulses, and in order to send the signals, they do require energy. So yes, and active transport, of course, it needs energy. So the answer should be D. Number 22. What is the word equation for anaerobic respiration in yeast? So the anaerobic respiration, the chemical formula for this is C6H12O6. So this is the chemical formula for glucose. And it does not require oxygen, hence the name anaerobic. So the glucose gets converted to ethanol, which is C2H5O2, and also CO2. However, we have to balance the whole equation. So if we just put 2 in front of ethanol and CO2, then it's all balanced. So this is the anaerobic respiration that occurs in yeast. Hence, we have to find the right answer for this one. So ethanol is a form of alcohol. It's one of the alcohol molecules. So A looks like the answer to me. Before we finish, let's talk about the anaerobic respiration in animals. Okay. So the glucose turns into lactic acid, which has a chemical formula of C3H6O3, and you just have to add 2 to balance the whole thing. The easiest way to remember this is that the lactic acid, formula for lactic acid, is exactly the half of this. Exactly the half of glucose. Okay. So C6 turns into C3, H12 turns into H6, O6 turns into O3. And you just have to add 2 in front. And that's lactic acid. Okay? Thanks, guys. Number 23. Which substances are excreted from the human body? So things that are excreted from our body are considered toxic materials. So carbon dioxide is, of course, can be toxic to us if it gets accumulated, because increase in carbon dioxide decreases pH, because it actually makes this carbonic acid, which is acid, and of course decreased pH causes denaturation of enzymes and so on. So it's not good. So yes, carbon dioxide gets excreted. Urea, of course, it's not a good thing, and it should be excreted. So 1 and 2. Anything that contains 1 and 2. But water, well, you have to say that water gets excreted from the body. I mean, it's not really toxic, but having too much water can actually become problematic in our body. It can increase our blood pressure. Even though it's not really toxic material, it can actually damage, or it can be harmful to our body. It does get excreted with others, with these two, not with these two. So urea and water get combined with the excess salt, which creates urine. So I would say C is the right answer. Okay, they all get excreted out. They all get removed from our body. So we can safely say that the water gets excreted from the human body. Okay. Number 24. What is the response to low concentration of glucose in the blood? So when the glucose concentration gets lowered in our blood, it means we need more glucose molecules. We usually convert glucose molecules into glycogen. And when we need more glucose molecules, we convert glycogen molecules into glucose or glucoses by breaking down the glycogen. So the hormone that's required to convert glycogen into glucose is called glucagon. The hormone that is required for the glucose glycogen conversion is called insulin. This question is asking what happens. What happens when the blood glucose concentration gets lowered? So we need more glucose molecules. So we need glucagon released, and it converts glycogen into glucose. So the answer should be B for this one. Number 25. Which structure can reduce how much light enters the eye? So the light enters the eye by going through, first of all, cornea, and it gets refracted. So the light gets refracted when it goes through the cornea. And then, of course, it has to go into the pupil, and it gets more refracted. Gets even refracted more. And then gets focused in one position at one point. So, as you can see from here, the answer is quite simple. You can see that B is a structure that controls how much light enters the eye. If it becomes widened, then more light can go in. If it becomes constricted, then only some light can enter the eye. So B is called the iris, and it controls how much light enters the eye. So the answer should be B for this one. Number 26. The diagram shows a section through human skin. What are the structures labeled X, Y, and Z? So it looks like X is quite close to the outside of the skin. So it's there to perceive many stimuli. Hence, X is a receptor. So it receives many stimuli. Y, it looks like it's attached to the hair, and its function is to contract, to erect the hair, or relax, to lower the hair. So Y should be hair erector muscle. So the answer is B already. And Z is the sweat gland because it produces sweat that goes to the outside the skin. I mean, it gets attached. It gets released from the skin and it gets attached to the skin for a while and receives all the heat energy and then gets vaporized or evaporated and then releases the heat energy, thereby cooling our body temperature down. So, the answer for this question is B. Number 27. A disease cannot be treated with antibiotics. What could be the reasons for this? So, it's talking about a disease that cannot be treated with antibiotics. Of course, antibiotics are they are used for killing bacteria. Okay, they kill bacteria. So, which means they do not have their effects on viruses. So, yeah, okay, it is not a bacterial disease. Yes. The pathogen is virus. Yes. The patient has become resistant to the antibiotics. That looks. So it says a disease cannot be treated with antibiotics. And the patient has become resistant to the antibiotic. It's not the patient that has become resistant to antibiotic, it's the pathogen. If the pathogen becomes antibiotic resistant, then the antibiotics does not affect the pathogen. Okay? It's not the patient. So this was a bit of a tricky question there. So the answer for this one is A. Number 28. The diagram shows a strawberry plant. These plants can reproduce asexually by producing plantlets. Why is this method of reproduction useful to strawberry farmers? So, looks like this plantlet comes from the same strawberry plant, which means, as it says, it's reproduced asexually, which means it's a clone. Clone means this plantlet has exactly the same DNA as this strawberry plant. So these two DNAs are the same. Okay? So it means that plantlets are produced by mitosis. So mitosis is the asexual reproduction. It's a form of asexual reproduction that creates genetically identical daughter cells, meaning clones. And they are genetically identical. So which means if these strawberry plants are very, let's say, healthy, and they contain very good genes, then these plantlets are also healthy, and they also contain the good genes. So that's going to be useful for strawberry farmers. So the answer for this one is D. Number 29. Which statement about human gametes is correct? So term gamete refers to sex cells like sperms or eggs. Okay. And yeah, so since it says human gametes, I just refer to sperms and eggs. If it's plant gametes, then I would say the pollens and eggs inside the female part of the plant. However, it says human gametes, so I set up the sperms and eggs. Okay, so let's have a look at the options here. The female gamete has acrosome. No, it doesn't have an acrosome. Acrosome is the part of the sperm that dissolves the jelly coat of the egg. Female gamete is, of course, it is non-motile, meaning that it can't move. Sperms can move, but eggs can't. B, female gamete has a jelly coating and is motile. No, it's not motile. It does have jelly coating, but it's not motile. C, the male gamete has a flagellum and is non-motile. Yes, it does have flagellum, or tail, but it is motile. So the answer should be D. The male gamete has an acrosome and is motile. Yes, it does have acrosome and is motile because it has a tail called flagellum. So the answer is D. Number 30. The diagram shows the stages of protein synthesis in a cell. Which row identifies molecules 1, 2, and 3? So 1 looks like string, and it's a nucleus, so it must be DNA. So the answer should be A or C. Number 2 looks like a short string that comes out from the nucleus. So it must be a copy or partial copy of DNA called mRNA. So the answer should be C already. But let's look at the next one. 3 looks like some components that are made into proteins. So what are proteins made of? Amino acids. So the answer surely is C for this one. So ribosomes are the organelles that produce proteins, and they assemble the amino acids into proteins, and the process is called translation. And number 2 is mRNA, and it's a copied version of DNA, and that process is called transcription. Okay. So, there we go. Answer C. Number 31. Which description of stem cells is correct? So stem cells they're often called undifferentiated cells. Okay. Undifferentiated means that it has no specific role. It can actually become almost any cells within the body. So it's unspecialized cell. So specialized means it has certain function. Since the stem cell doesn't actually have any role, it's called unspecialized cell. Okay. So they are unspecialized cells that divide by mitosis. So the daughter cells are produced by mitosis, which means that the stem cell gets divided into two, or each of them gets divided into two daughter cells, and they may become specialized cells for specific functions. So C is the right answer for this. Meiosis is that's the cell division to make sperm cells or egg cells, like the sex cells. Okay, but the stem cells, they actually are present in during embryonic stage, and they have to go through mitosis in order to promote the growth, and not only the growth but also the development, which means many cells are needed, many types of cells are needed. So in order to create many types of cells, we need many cells first. So it goes through mitosis and increases its number of cells, and then they can later become sperms or red blood cells, whatever. So the answer is C for this one. Question 32. In some breeds of cattle, hair color shows coat dominance. The coats may be red, white, or roan, a mixture of red and white hairs. What are the expected phenotypes when a parent with a red coat is crossed with a parent with a roan coat? So it's talking about coat dominance. Coat dominance means that in the presence of both dominant alleles, the both characteristics are shown. So, for instance, this is talking about cattle. So cattle may have white furs with red dots, or red hair with white dots. Oops. Okay, you probably look like this. Change into this one, so like this. So it's showing both of its characteristics. That's what it means by codominance. Okay. So this question is asking when a parent with red coat is crossed with a parent with a roan coat. Then you just do simple problem solving. Not B, or you can see that 50% of the roan, the red, and 50% of the roan phenotypes are expected. So hence the answer should be A for this one. Okay. So remember what it means by codominance. All good. Number 33. Which statement is correct? Let's have a look at option A. Discontinuous variation is mainly caused by environmental factors. Nope. So discontinuous variations are actually caused by genetic factors. So let's say the example of the discontinuous variation is like blood type. Okay. So even if you change the even if you change the environmental factors, it's not going to cause a change in your blood type, right? Let's say you're blood type A, but it's not going to change. I mean, even if you're placed in a remote area, you're not going to change your blood type to B or A, AB or O. So it doesn't make any sense, right? So A is not correct. ionizing radiation and some chemicals decrease the rate of mutation. No, it increases the rate of mutation. Like the radiation and chemicals, like mutagenic chemicals, can increase the rate of mutation. So B is not the answer. C, a gene mutation is a change in base sequence. Yes, this is correct. The term mutation is a random change in base sequence of DNA or genes. So C is correct. D is not. Small variations in height within a human population are an example of continuous variation. So continuous variation means the variations that can be expressed in numbers and that has a lot of intermediates. Okay, intermediate values in between. So height can be expressed in terms of numbers. So D is not the answer for this one. Okay? Number 34. A person who is homozygous for the sickle cell allele has a child with a person that is heterozygous. What is the likelihood that the offspring would be homozygous for the sickle cell allele? So this question is talking about sickle cell. Because sickle cell has two alleles, HBA, HBS. So if a person has two HBA allele, then he or she is normal, meaning that his or her red blood cells will be normal. If a person has HBA and HBS, then his or her red blood cells will be affected. Some of them will be normal and some of them will be sickle shaped. So you can say that this is a carrier genotype. If a person has two HBS alleles, then the person is fully affected, meaning that all of the person's red blood cells will be sickle shaped. So usually this person cannot born. So since all of the red blood cells are changed, its oxygen transport decreases tremendously. So as an embryo, they cannot develop and they can't grow, and they soon die before they're born. So these two people, or these two types, will survive. Okay, so this question is asking that the person is homozygous for sickle cell. So homozygous for sickle cell means the person has HBS and HBS. This is quite hard to happen because normally a person with homozygous dominant alleles cannot born. But let's say this is an exception. So, if a person has HBS and HBS, the person is fully affected. The person's red blood cells will be all sickle shaped. So this is homozygous for the sickle cell allele. So the question asks if this person has a child with a person that is heterozygous, then what is the likelihood that the offspring would be homozygous? So if we just do the Punnett square, these are heterozygous, so we're not going to care too much about that. But these two. So these two are homozygous for the sickle cell. So so in total there are 4 outcomes, and 2 out of the 4 results in the homozygous for the sickle cell allele. Hence, the answer should be 50. Number 35. The diagram shows a food web. How many organisms are feeding at more than one trophic level? The easiest way to solve this problem is to look at the organism and see how many organisms that particular organism consumes. So for eagle, it consumes hare, rabbit, grouse. So 3 things, right? And these guys all consume heather. So this eagle is actually feeding at more than one trophic level. So eagle is 1. Let's look at stoat. Okay, stoat also consumes shrew, rabbit, and hare as well, and these guys all consume heather, and this one consumes beetle as well. So that's number 2. So stoat feeds at more than one trophic level. And let's look at grouse. So grouse consume both heather and beetle. So that's another one. So the answer is D. So grouse is feeding at more than one trophic level. So it's feeding with the producer as well as the primary consumer. So it's feeding at more than one trophic level. 3. Okay, so the answer is 3 for this one. I mean D. Number 36. The diagram shows part of the nitrogen cycle. Which row shows the correct labels? So let's start with these words. Denitrification means it's the conversion of nitrate ions to nitrogen in atmosphere. So number 1 is the correct one. So the answer will be either C or D. Absorption means organisms or the environment sucking or absorbing the chemical substances. So in this case, it looks like nitrate ions are going into the plant. So I guess number 2 is the absorption. So we got the answer already. It's C, but let's have a look at the nitrification and nitrogen fixation as well. Nitrification means it's conversion of ammonium or ammonia to nitrite or nitrates. So 3 is the or refers to nitrification, and nitrogen fixation is conversion of nitrogen gas into the nitrates or proteins. Actually, I mean, it doesn't actually get converted into proteins straight away. It gets changed into nitrates first, and then it is used to make amino acids and then proteins, and then become part of the nitrogen in plants. Nitrogen fixation usually refers to the conversion of nitrogen to nitrates. So the answer is C. Number 37. Which statement explains why bacteria are used in genetic engineering? So genetic engineering means taking a gene from one species and transferring it to another species. And bacteria are often used because they have what is called plasmids. So plasmids act as vectors. Vectors are the things that transports or transfer genes from one place to another. And since bacteria have plasmids that act as vectors, we can safely and efficiently transfer genes from one species to another. So D is the right answer. A is not the right answer. If it can only manufacture simple molecules, it's no good use. B is not the right answer because it causes ethical concerns and it's a bad thing. Okay, and C is not the answer as well because they have very fast reproduction rate. They go through the process of binary fission. Binary fission means one bacteria becomes two bacteria, or one bacterium becomes two bacteria by simply dividing itself. Okay, that's the binary fission. All right, so the answer is D for this one. Number 38. The graph shows the growth of the fungus Penicillium and its production of the antibiotic penicillin in a fermenter. Which stage of Penicillium growth curve produces the highest concentration of penicillin? This looks like a complex question, but I assure you it's not. It's not that complex. It's not complicated at all. So it's asking about the highest concentration of penicillin. As you can see, the penicillin concentration is the highest here. And this, it's actually showing no increase or decrease at all. And that stage is called stationary phase. So everything is stationary, everything is constant. This phase is called lag phase. This is exponential. This is the stationary. And if the graph falls and shows decrease, it shows a decrease, then this is called death phase. Okay. So the answer for this one is C. Number 39. Which statement about sustainable resources is correct? So sustainable resources are the resources that can be produced quite quickly. So they are very hard to run out because we can just produce them back like quickly. So their production rate is equal to their removal rate. Yep, this is the answer. So if the production rate is equal to their removal rate, then they can't run out. So C is the right answer. Sustainable resources are not. It doesn't have like fossil fuels in it. So fossil fuels are non-sustainable. Okay. So renewable resources are sustainable resources because we can renew them quite easily. So they're not non-renewable resources. So both A and B are not the answers. D, the production rate is smaller. No, then they're gonna run out. So D is not the right answer. So C is the right answer for this one. What is the least sustainable method of helping to maintain a population of fish in a lake? So least sustainable method. So the method that doesn't actually sustain the fish population in a lake. So A. Let's look at A. Oh my God. Here's the answer. Only allowing female fish to be caught and eaten. Then who's gonna give birth to the fish? Like baby fish, huh? That's the least sustainable method. Okay. So A is the right answer. Let's have a look at the others. B. Only allow fishing at certain times of the year. Okay, well, that looks promising. We can sustain the fish population with that method. Only allowing fishing in certain areas. Yes, same thing happens there. Only allowing the largest fish to be caught and eaten. Yep, this is a good one as well, because the little baby fish can live and they can become bigger and they can give birth to the baby fish again. So we can sustain the population of fish in that way. Okay, so A is the right answer for the last question for 2022 October-November paper 2 version 21.